Over the decades, our volunteers have restored and preserved some of the most historic aircraft of aviation history. They've restored aircraft for such prestigious institutions as the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., and the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida, just to name a few. In addition, when an original aircraft may no longer exist, a reproduction is needed to tell a story. Fortunately, these skilled craftsmen have been able to construct some of the most accurate reproductions and replicas ever built. We actually have 2 restoration facilities, but many of these aircraft were completed right here in the lower level of the Ford building. These volunteers are the pride of the San Diego Aerospace Museum. They represent the true spirit of volunteerism that runs through our community, and they're at the heart of the museum's mission: celebrate, educate, and inspire.
Well, when I was a kid, I was building model airplanes all the time, and in my teens I accomplished my private pilot's license at age 17. This is in Canada, and by the time I was 21, I was hired by the local airline. That was my one and only real job in my lifetime, because I was in the airline for 33 years. Took early retirement, moved to California, and here I am. Well, I was sitting here in San Diego in retirement, looking for something to do, and I'd heard about the workshop here at the museum. I thought, that's something I've always wanted to do, so I phoned them up and they said, come on down, and I did that, and took an instant liking to it, and they said, come on in anytime you want to. So I've been 3 days a week for the last 2 years.
Well, I was born in '28, and growing up the war started, and I was pretty interested in airplanes. So I was in the Air Scouts and the Civil Air Patrol Cadets, and when everybody else went off to war, I ended up the scout leader. And I took aeronautics in high school. I worked at the Grassfield Airport, worked at Goodyear Aircraft, building airplanes. I soloed in a light plane, and I'd intended to go into the Army Air Corps, but the war ended before I was old enough to get in, so they closed all of the programs, and I ended up going into the Navy through photography school before I was able to get into flight training. And went to flight training in '49 after 2 years of college. And then in 1950, right after the Korean War began, 3 of us came out here to California together after getting our wings. And that was Neil Armstrong, Herb Graham, and myself. And everybody knows about Neil. The rest of us did about the same things Neil did. We all worked at the grass field, and we all were in the Scouts. Seems like everybody I know did that. And that's how I got into aviation. I was in the Navy 30 years, rose to captain, had several commands, flew the Hawkeye, the early warning aircraft, and started out in the Corsair. Well, Dan and I are working on the main mounts for the P-26, the landing gear assemblies. Found it fascinating to take a piece of flat sheet aluminum and turn it into something three-dimensional. Right now we're trying to shape the fairings for the wheel pants and hope to have all this ready to go under the wing within the next 8 months or so.
I'm right now, with help, I'm building the left-hand aileron for the airplane. We completed the first one. You probably saw it, it's over on the wing. And this is the second aileron. All the parts had to be formed from basic material, patterns made first, then build each part, each rib, each reinforcing part, so on, and then put it all together. I started on the Ford Tri-Motor, and that had just come into the museum within that year. So I spent several years on the Ford Tri-Motor, and then on a beautifully restored SBD dive bomber upstairs. We worked about 3 years, I believe, on that.
Okay, this is the bead blaster, and very fine micro sized little bead pellets, and we spray it anywhere from about 25 to 100 pounds against metal with rust and whatever else might be on it. We have to clean oil and water. We don't want moisture of any kind, grease, because it gums the beads up and makes little mud balls out of them, and that won't work. It has to be dry, but there's a vacuum pump over here. It's like a house cleaner vacuum that takes all the dust and debris away as we use this thing. So if we didn't have something, the dust would get so thick inside we couldn't see what we're doing. So it's relatively a simple machine. And these are those little fine beads blasted off. Makes it real nice. Takes it down to the bare metal, and then we'll coat it with something to preserve it.
Bill Gibbs came down to San Diego High School, gave a presentation in Russ Auditorium one Friday at noon, and he told us all about how aviation was a coming thing, and there's going to be a plane in every garage and that sort of thing. And if you didn't know how to fly, you just weren't with it. So he had a special deal out of Gibbs Airport, which is now called Montgomery Field. You could go out there after school one night a week, get a half-hour a duel. He was going to charge $7.50 an hour for duel, so for $3.75 a week you can learn to fly. So about 15 of us went out there the next week, and we all got a ride in an airplane and got to see how that went. And the next week, I would say about 4 guys showed up, and 2 weeks later there was just 2 of us that stuck with this. And I stuck with it for I think about 20 hours of dual and solo, and then kind of ran out of time and money and sort of dropped it at that point. So then what happened about 5 years ago, I was driving along listening to the San Diego news station, and somebody made a bad landing and wrecked his landing gear out at Gibbs Airport. And the news quoted airport manager Bill Dalby said that nobody was hurt. And I got to thinking, Bill Dalby, where have I heard the name Dalby before? Well, when I was a student, we had several different instructors. One of them was Jim Dalby. The instructors kind of ran the gamut from deadheads to hot rods, and Jim Dalby was always known as Hot Rod Dalby, and we had another instructor that we called Deadhead McQuaid. But anyway, Jim Dalby was kind of the favorite amongst the rest of us who were learning to fly, because his technique was really to show you a side slip, you know, where you saw nothing but dirt out this window and nothing but blue sky out this window. And he was really a lot of fun to fly with. But anyway, when I heard the name Bill Dalby, I called the airport and talked to Bill. And I said, by any chance, are you any relation to Jim Dalby, who used to be an instructor here many, many years ago? He said, oh yeah, that's my father. And I asked if he was still around. He said, oh yeah, he's very active. As a matter of fact, he's a big gun with the San Diego Aerospace Museum. You ought to give him a call, and he'll show you what's going on down there. So I did. I had lunch with Jim, and he showed me around the restoration department. And when I saw this restoration department, I said, hey, how do you get in on this? He said, you just show up.